that feeling, right? When you bump into someone you're just thinking about. Or like a solution just pops into your head.
Yeah, that sense that things are connected somehow.
Exactly. It's that weird sense that there's something else going on under the surface.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Because what if those little nudges, those uncanny coincidences, what if they aren't random?
What if they're whispers of something, well, deeper?
Right.
And what's really fascinating is how those everyday things, those experiences, might tap into this really old idea. The thread of fate.
Okay, the thread of fate.
Now, we're not talking about some, physical, mystical thing here. The material we've been looking at suggests it's more like an inherent interconnectedness.
Yeah.
A kind of web of resonance that underpins everything.
Interconnectedness, okay. And for this deep dive, based on some really, really thought-provoking stuff you shared, our mission, I guess, is to get a better handle on this thread. What is it exactly in this context? How does it show up? How does it function? And, ultimately, what might it mean for how we see our own lives?
Okay, so to get us started, the material we've explored seems to point to three kind of fundamental aspects of this thread. You can think of them as different ways this connection shows up.
Right. Okay, three aspects. So first, there's the echo of the past, which is the idea that this thread lets us sense echoes, like forgotten knowledge or maybe old feelings.
Exactly. Then there's the unbroken link.
The unbroken link.
Which suggests this continuous connection to our current path, even when maybe we feel a bit lost or adrift.
Okay, like an anchor?
Sort of. And finally, the imminent thread. That's about those, fleeting intuitive glimpses into what might be coming next, potential futures.
Ah, okay. Those gut feelings.
Precisely. And a really key insight from the sources he's looked at is that engaging with this thread, it isn't about trying to control some big cosmic force.
Yeah.
It's more about aligning ourselves with its natural flow, recognizing the resonances that are already there. And this alignment, the material suggests, that's how we gain a deeper understanding of reality.
Okay, so alignment, not control. It's less about pulling strings and more about tuning our own instrument, maybe, getting on the right frequency.
That's a great way to put it.
Now, this interconnectedness, it doesn't just show up in one single way, does it? The material lays out 10 different forms it can take.
No, it's quite diverse, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
These 10 forms really highlight the multifaceted nature of this whole idea of resonance and connection. Should we touch on each one briefly?
Let's do it. Focus on the core idea of each. So first up is the echoed thread.
Okay.
Which is all about boosting memory, right? Making past experiences feel more vivid again.
Yeah, bringing the past into sharper focus. Then there's the binding veil.
Binding veil. Maintaining connections across distances.
Exactly. Think about how you can feel close to someone, even if they're, halfway across the world. That feeling.
Yeah, that persistent sense of connection. Got it.
And then the silent anchor. The material describes this as a kind of spiritual grounding. It stops us feeling completely untethered.
Like an inner compass, maybe? Keeping your sense of self?
Something like that, yeah. And following that is the phantom pulse.
Phantom pulse.
This suggests that our energetic connections can subtly influence others, even without, direct interaction.
Subtle is the right word. Okay. Then we've got the shrouded loop.
Right.
Which is about not being forgotten. Like your impact or memory just sort of lingers.
Yeah, it subtly stays in the minds of others. Then the returning string.
Now this one's intriguing.
It is, isn't it?
It's about lost things, maybe objects, maybe opportunities finding their way back somehow through this alignment.
Exactly. And what's fascinating there is the implication of kind of natural pull towards resolution. Or completion, maybe.
Okay. Next.
The omens link. This one sharpens our intuition, makes us more sensitive to those little signs that might come before something significant happens.
The gut feeling again. That sense that something's about to happen.
That inner knowing, yeah.
Yeah.
Then there's the umbral bond.
Umbral bond, connection to unseen forces, interacting beyond our usual senses.
This feels like it's venturing into the more mysterious aspects.
Definitely.
And it leads nicely into the shadow's hold.
Which is described as simultaneous awareness. Like being conscious on multiple levels at once.
Yeah, think of like a musician playing their part, but also hearing the whole band, the whole harmony.
Wow. Okay. Multi-layered awareness.
That kind of thing.
And finally, the 10th one.
The woven fate. This implies our actions become part of this bigger sort of karmic tapestry.
So choices have consequences that ripple out.
Exactly. And the key thing to remember with all of these, according to the source material, is they aren't about forceful manipulation. It's all about recognizing and aligning with these inherent resonances.
Alignment, resonance. Okay. So if these threads are all about that, how do they actually come about? What's the mechanism here?
Well, the material talks about something called the weaving process.
Waving, okay.
Basically, every action we take, every relationship we form,
Uh,
it creates these threads of connection.
right.
Some might be fleeting, they fade if they're not nurtured. Others get stronger with attention, with energy.
And what about broken connections?
Well, the sources suggest that even if a connection seems to break, it still leaves a kind of energetic residue, a trace.
So even severed ties aren't completely gone, they leave echoes. That's interesting.
It is.
And how do we actually interact with these threads then? How do we notice them or access their potential?
That's where resonance and activation comes in. The key, according to the material, is focused awareness.
Paying attention.
Right. Paying attention to the subtle signals, the intuitive nudges. When our own internal state aligns with the resonance of a specific thread, it becomes more accessible, almost naturally. But, and this is important, trying to force a connection or force an outcome, that can actually create resistance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like trying to force a friendship, it usually backfires.
Exactly.
Now, the material also mentions a law of inevitability. That sounds a bit heavy.
It does sound deterministic, doesn't it?
Yeah. Does that mean we don't really have free will? Is it all mapped out?
That's a really important question, and the sources are quite clear on this. The thread of fate doesn't negate our ability to choose. We still make our own choices, author our own actions.
Okay, good.
However, once those choices are made and a thread is formed, its influence becomes part of the bigger picture. Past actions do have consequences.
Right.
And while connections can evolve or be overridden by new ones, the echoes of what was, they remain. So it's not about a predetermined script. It's more about the enduring impact, the weight of the choices we make.
Okay. That's a crucial distinction. The weight of choice, not a fixed destiny. Phew. Okay. Now, working with these kinds of energies, it sounds powerful, but are there downsides? Potential pitfalls?
Absolutely. It's important to have a balanced view. The material we looked at does point out a few potential challenges. One is entanglement.
An entanglement.
Yeah, if we try to become aware of and engage with too many threads at once, focusing on the past, present, potential futures all at the same time, it can lead to a kind of mental fragmentation, feeling overwhelmed by just too many connections.
Wow, that sounds like sensory overload, but on a cosmic scale.
Pretty much. What else should we be mindful of?
What else?
There's something called the tethering effect.
Tethering.
The more we focus on a particular thread, the stronger its pull can become. So, for instance, if you're constantly dwelling on past regrets, that might create a really strong tether.
Making it hard to move on.
Exactly. Making it difficult to fully engage with the present. You can become anchored to what was, preventing forward movement.
Yeah, that really resonates, being stuck in the past. And what if you actively try to break a connection? Cut ties forcefully?
The sources discuss forcibly severing threads. Now, a connection might naturally weaken and fade over time if it's ignored.
Right.
But trying to abruptly cut it off, that can leave an energetic wound, apparently.
Yeah.
And often, those connections that were forcefully severed can resurface unexpectedly later on.
It's like trying to suppress a memory. It often finds way back anyway.
Something like that. A more gentle release is probably healthier than a sudden break.
Okay. So, all of this is incredibly interesting theoretically, but how can we actually use this understanding in our daily lives? What are some practical applications?
Well, the material offers some fascinating possibilities there. One is called retracing one's own path.
Retracing.
So if you're feeling, say, directionless or disconnected from your purpose, you can use your awareness to reconnect with moments in your past when you felt really aligned. Truly yourself.
Okay, but it's not time travel, right?
Yeah. No, not physically reliving it. It's about recovering the essence of that feeling. And that can bring out a shift in your present energy.
Like finding your North Star again. I like that. What about relationships?
Well, like we discussed with the binding veil, the thread maintains connections. So, by understanding this, we can consciously focus on strengthening connections.
Okay.
If you've had a meaningful bond with someone, you can subtly nurture that connection. And you might find circumstances shift in a way that allows for renewed contact, or maybe just a sense of closure if something felt unfinished.
But it's not about manipulation, though. You're not forcing them.
No, exactly. It's about nurturing the potential that's already there. Alignment, remember.
Right, alignment. Okay. And what else?
And finally, the material touches on sensing future alignments.
Ooh, okay. I like predicting the future.
More like sensing the path. By paying attention to the subtle feeling of a particular thread, does it feel tight, loose? Is it fading? You might gain a sense of whether a certain path aligns with your overall journey. Well, a tightening might suggest you're on the right track. A loosening, or maybe it vanishing altogether, could indicate you're diverging, or perhaps there's been a significant change in direction.
So it's really about honing your intuition and just paying much closer attention to those subtle cues all around us.
Precisely.
Okay. Now, this concept, the thread of fate, it's pretty profound on its own. But how does it tie into some of the other fascinating ideas in the materials you share? Does it connect?
Oh, definitely. And this is where we start to see this beautiful interconnectedness between the concepts themselves. Is really quite elegant.
Okay, like what?
Well, let's take the Tongue of Enu guide. Remember how it describes influence operating on a vibrational principle?
Yeah, where our intent and inner resonance shape reality and affect others, but not necessarily through spoken words.
Exactly. It's about what we're putting out there energetically, and crucially, alignment is key.
Right.
Now, think about the resonance we've been discussing with the thread of fate. Both concepts underscore that aligning with a fundamental frequency or vibration is crucial.
Okay, I see the parallel.
With the Tongue of Anu, it's aligning your inner state with the desired outcome. With the thread of fate, it's aligning yourself with the inherent interconnectedness of reality itself.
It's like different lenses looking at the same underlying principle, the power of alignment.
Precisely.
What about the Veilgate Sigil Guide that talked about using a conscious threshold activator?
Another strong parallel there. The Veilgate Sigil, according to that guide, acts as a key, right? Unlocked by awareness and resonance.
To open pathways.
Exactly. Opening pathways to realms beyond our everyday perception. Liminal pathways. This mirrors how aligning with the thread of fate grants us access to deeper layers of reality, to that greater understanding of the connections beneath the surface.
So both need that inner attunement, a recognition that there's more than meets the eye.
Yes. You could almost see the sigil as maybe a specific tool for consciously navigating those deeper layers.
While the thread of fate is the underlying fabric of those layers.
That's one way to look at it, yeah.
Interesting. And the Whispering Quill Guide, that focused on the subtle power of language, didn't it?
It did. The Whispering Quill, as described, works by shaping perception through carefully chosen words, through tone, operating at an unseen level of influence.
Okay.
Now that resonates with the subtle energetic connections we talked about with the thread of fate, especially the phantom pulse, remember?
Yeah, influencing others through lingering energetic links.
Right. Both highlight that influence doesn't always require overt action. It can be much more nuanced, almost imperceptible.
So the Whispering Quill could be seen as a tool for intentionally weaving certain threads of influence through communication.
Potentially, yes. That fits. And finally, what about void working? That emphasized connecting with primordial cosmic energies.
Through inner stillness and intent, right.
Exactly. Void working, as we understand it from that material, is about aligning with fundamental cosmic entities through that inner stillness and focused intention. And this echoes that core principle of alignment that just runs right through the concept of the thread of fate. Both practices seem to recognize that accessing deeper potential, whether it's cosmic energy or the interconnectedness of reality, requires that state of inner harmony and focused awareness.
Wow. It really does all seem to circle back to this fundamental idea, resonance and alignment. They seem key to understanding and interacting with these deeper aspects of reality.
It certainly seems that way based on these materials.
So bringing it all together then, what's the most important thing to really grasp about this thread of fate? The core message.
I think the material we explored puts it beautifully, really simply. It is never absent, only unnoticed.
Never absent, only unnoticed.
If something feels lost, it's often because our awareness has just shifted away from it. If a connection seems to disappear, maybe the thread has weakened, but perhaps it's not completely broken.
Right.
And if we're searching for answers, the thread isn't hiding them. It's just waiting for us to acknowledge its presence, to tune in.
So it's not about magically creating connections out of thin air.
No.
It's about becoming aware of the intricate web that's actually always been there, connecting everything.
Exactly that. Engaging with the thread of fate isn't about forceful control. It's about developing the sensitivity to perceive it, the understanding to maybe interpret it, and crucially, the willingness to allow it to reveal the deeper connections that underpin our whole existence.
Okay. So, just to wrap things up, we've taken a pretty deep dive into this fascinating idea of the thread of fate, this underlying resonance weaving through reality. We looked at its 10 different forms, how these threads seem to come into being through a kind of weaving process, how we can align with them through resonance, not force.
We also touched on the potential challenges like entanglement or forcibly severing ties.
Right, the pitfalls.
Right.
And then some practical ways we might apply this understanding, from retracing our path to strengthening connections, even sensing future alignments.
And we saw how this core idea of the thread really intertwines beautifully with other concepts, vibrational influence like the tongue of Anu, accessing hidden realities with things like the Veil Gate Sigil, subtle communication via the Whispering Quill, and aligning with cosmic energies as in void working.
Yeah.
And the central thread, excuse the pun,
Go on.
the central thread tying it all together is this profound understanding that connection, in all its forms, isn't just something we experience sometimes. It's a fundamental aspect of the fabric of reality itself, whether we consciously notice it or not.
Yeah. So here's a final thought then for you listening. If this thread of fate is always present, subtly connecting every aspect of our lives, what might you begin to notice if you simply started paying closer attention to the subtle connections, the resonances in your own experience? How might that shift in perspective change the way you understand the things you've encountered and maybe the path you're walking right now?